encouraged when I see constitutional conservatives rising up to run for public office. I think that we are going to see a tsunami in the 2014 elections. And before any more happens, before I forget, Tracy was talking about how important this election is. Let me tell you something else that is very important. The deadline to register to vote in the primary is February 3rd. That means we got less than 2 weeks to get people registered to vote. Are there any pastors here in this room? Can I see the hands of any? No pastors here? One pastor. Well, you guys need to start inviting pastors to come to these meetings.
Amen.
I want to recommend to the one pastor that's here, and I want to recommend to each and every one of you that you take this message to your pastor. And that your pastor, you encourage your pastor to have a voter registration booth in the lobby of your church, of his church, this Sunday and next Sunday. Now, they're probably going to come up with the excuse, oh, I don't want to be involved in partisan politics. Registering to vote is not partisan politics. It is your civic responsibility.
Amen.
As a matter of fact, did you know that there are countries where you are fined if you don't vote? Liberty is not free, as Ronald Reagan so well told us. But people have become so complacent in America. I mean, it is so often that I hear people telling me, when I tell them about losing my freedom in Cuba, they said, oh, that could never happen here. That is happening here. But it's happening a little bit at a time. We become so complacent that we don't realize what is happening in America. It's like the old story about the frog. You dump a frog in a pot of hot water, that frog is going to jump right out. But you put a frog in a pot of cold water, and you put it on the stove, and that water is warming up a little at a time. That frog is comfortable. That frog is complacent. And you can boil that frog to death. And unfortunately, many of us are being boiled to death because of our complacency. Well, I think the time has come to stop being complacent.
Amen.
I think the time has come for us to realize that we don't have much time. We don't have much time. The decay in America of morals, of everything else, of the usurpation of the rule of law, of what is happening in the political arena, if we don't do something and feel an urgency, we are at the danger of losing this country. So we need to throw complacency aside and become involved. As a Christian, I would say my greatest desire is that one day when I meet my Lord, that I will hear the words, well done, good and faithful servant. That's the highest desire of my heart. To say that I have done everything I could to further the gospel, to further righteousness, to further making this country again what it was before. You see, we have been dumbed down by an educational system that has rewritten history, that has basically become a way of indoctrinating kids into a particular persuasion. And unfortunately, it's not a biblical persuasion. It's not different, that perhaps the methods are a little bit more, just underhanded, or maybe you don't see them as clearly. But let me just give you an idea of what happened in Cuba overnight And that's why it was a shock to us, which here is being in a much slower pace, but inexorably is going in the same direction. When Castro took over, of course, pastors were persecuted, religion was persecuted, for one very, very simple reason. You see, socialism needs for government